Hello, welcome to Sports World Have Your Say with me, Amanda Davis. Coming up in the next fun-packed hour of football chat. A bridge too far, Chelsea get caught in Howard's web as Manchester United come back from 3 down, but still can't get that win at Stamford Bridge. Who will wear the captain's armband when England next play? Not John Terry and not Rio either.
It was taken away from me, so I was just going to concentrate on playing for Manchester United.
And I'm going to obviously support Tunisia against Ghana for this match. Come on Tunisia, come on Tunisia.
And after the tragedy of Port Said, where does Egyptian football stand now? Yeah, lots to talk about in the next hour or so. There may have been a cold snap around Europe this week, but there's certainly been some heated debates on our Facebook and Twitter sites. Keep those comments coming in to all the usual places. The team is standing by waiting to speak to you. Hashtag SWHYS is in use, as is our Sports World Have Your Say Facebook page. And of course, the phone line +44 20 70 83 73 33. Why not pick up the phone, give us a call. Former Crystal Palace, Sheffield Wednesday and Charlton striker Mark Bright is with us again this week. But before we hit the messages and get Mark's thoughts, let's get a summary of the latest news. You're watching Sports World Have Your Say. We'll reflect on a sensational game at Stamford Bridge and what it means for the title race in a minute. But it's quarterfinals weekend at the Africa Cup of Nations. Ghana and Tunisia have just kicked off, looking for the right to join Zambia, Ivory Coast and Mali in the semi-finals. Hamadi is a Tunisia fan who joins us in the studio. This is a really big one, isn't it, this, Hamadi? 2 former champions. How do you rate Tunisia's chances?
Well, obviously Ghana is favourite. They have very famous players. They play all over Europe and so on. But you never know. This is a tournament. This is a one match off. And if Tunisia play the way they like to play, if they're not stopped by Ghana, I think we can give them a match. Okay, they're favourite, but it's football, and you never know.
Well, we've got Gary with us from Ghana, back watching the football this week. Gary, big boost for you guys. John Mensah is back.
Well, John Mensah is back, but I think that the general atmosphere is that Ghana are indeed favourites, like your man from Tunisia said. And then again, it's looking like the Ghanaians are playing efficient football. Tunisia are also playing quite well, and so the vibe is around, and I feel that it's going to be 50-50.
Gary, have you got a message for Hamadi, who's sitting here watching the game, obviously supporting the other side in the studio with us?
Well, I mean, I just hope they have a good game, and I'm sure he's going to wish us a good game as well. Hopefully, there isn't any acrimony and, you know, a lot of bad fouling and tackling and things like that. I expect a good game. The game that just finished between Gabon and Mali went to penalty shootout, and Gabon went out. But I expect this to be a more open game.
Hamadi, have you got a response?
Well, it's very kind of him to wish for a fair game, but this is a knockout competition. And I'm only interested in Tunisia beating Ghana, it will be a great achievement for a small country like us. Ghana are big, they're favourite, they have great players, but imagine for a bit if we can knock them out of this competition. It will be great. It will be great for Tunisia. I hope the best win, and I hope it's Tunisia.
OK, guys, don't hesitate to shout as and when something happens. We will, of course, be coming back to you throughout the next 55 minutes or so. But let's move on to what was a fantastic game at Stamford Bridge. Manchester United came back from 3 down to draw 3 apiece with Chelsea. Felt like a bit of a win in some ways for United fans. Wayne Rooney, though, and Sir Alex Ferguson said 2 points dropped. Mark Bright, what did you make of that?
Well, it's about 2 points dropped, I think 2 points gained. I mean, 3-0 down. It was a fantastic game, one of the Premier League classics, Amanda. I mean, just sitting in the office watching it with everybody, and you know, we were all trying to predict before the game what the score would be, and just ended up being an epic game. You know, such a Manchester United comeback. I mean, I was playing for Sheffield Wednesday, I think it was '93, when we were 3-0 up at half-time against Manchester United at home at Hillsborough. They came back to 3-3, and our goalkeeper Chris Woods pulled off 2 saves to stop them winning. So it's Manchester United through and through. Their philosophy of always going for the win is fantastic. For Chelsea, though, it was a real disappointment to go 3 up at home and draw the game 3-3 in the end with Manchester United.
It has to be said, though, there's one man who is making most of the comments on Facebook and Twitter. That is the referee, Howard Webb, once again. Moral and Nigerian in the UK post, no wonder EPL teams can't match the Spanish teams. There's too much cheating in the EPL. Godwin in Uganda says, I'm now considering watching the Bundesliga. The Premier League's become predictable and useless. Why retain Howard Webb? Akim in South Sudan post, Chelsea can never win a game against Manchester United if Howard Webb is the referee. He is biased for sure. Well, let's welcome Tatiana to the conversation, a Manchester United fan. What do you make of Howard Webb's performance today?
Well, it's a little tricky because the Welbeck goal was questionable, but I definitely don't agree that, oh, Howard Webb is, you know, completely all about United. I think it's, you know, kind of a little bitter to say that, to be perfectly honest. There were 2 penalties that should have been given in the first half, and, you know, that's a fact. And the first penalty that Rooney scored was a penalty. So I don't know. I just think it's a little bit bitter to say that. I thought United played brilliantly in that second half. They really fought back, and it was just a beautiful testament to United's spirit. And I was really proud of them to get back, especially at Stamford Bridge. That is not an easy stadium to do something like that.
Okay, well, Mark, I think,
Forget it. Howard Webb is our best referee. You know, he refereed the World Cup. Oh, I think there's been a goal.
Has there been a goal?
In the Africa Cup of Nations.
Steve, can you see the goal? Can you bring us up to date with what is going on there?
I can, yeah. Ghana have just taken the lead. It's Ghana 1, Tunisia 0. It was a corner, and it was headed in by, I'll just try and work out who that was. I think it might have been Essien, number 5. No, it wasn't Essien. But it's a goal for Ghana. They're ahead, and Hamadi is keeping rather quiet here.
Go on, Hamadi, what's your reaction to that? Not the best start for Tunisia there. John Mensah, in fact, the injured, suspended captain, comes back and scores for Ghana.
Well, we know how physical the Ghanaians are, and after a corner, the Tunisians should have been more careful, you know, and they haven't. They let him come from the back and gave him space to knock it, and it's a bad start for Tunisia. 1-0.
Real positive start, Amanda. Great near post corner, flicked on. John Mensah, as you said, the captain coming back from injury, diving in with a header, and, you know, beaten finalists 2 years ago, and, you know, a very good young team and a mixture with a few experienced players. So I think Ghana want to get back to the final again. So I can see the final being the Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, to be honest.
So all a little bit flat here in the studio. Gary, what is it like in Ghana? Well, I don't know whether Gary's saying anything. Gary, there's still quite a long way to go. You don't want to get too excited just yet.
That's our response.
Okay, they're pretty pleased in Ghana. Hamadi not quite so excited sitting here in the studio. Let's go back to reaction from Stamford Bridge today. I suppose Hamadi could take some consolation from the fact that Manchester United were 3 down and then came back to 3-3. This is what Sir Alex Ferguson had to say.
A fantastic game. I mean, for the Barclays Premier League they will want to renew the contract for another 10 years. that game today epitomises what English football's about. 100% commitment from both teams. A real, you couldn't take your eyes off it. Put it that way.
Manchester United's never say die spirit, but also a sign of weaknesses in both Chelsea and Manchester United defences in terms of the impact of Howard Webb. Dawit Kadan says time and time again in EPL's games and the referees manage to steal the headlines. Sad, to be honest. Manchester United, though, Mark, I suppose, have got to be pretty happy on the whole, and Fergie did have a little bit of a smile on his face.
Delighted, absolutely delighted. And like I said before, Amanda, people blame the referee Howard Webb. Howard Webb is one of our best referees. He refereed the World Cup final. Now, there's no question that, you know, Daniel Sturridge chased Everett, kicked him on the ankle, that's a penalty. Ivanovic sticks his leg out, catches Welbeck, that's a penalty. It's questionable whether Cahill in the first half tripping Danny Welbeck was a penalty. It was right on the edge of the 18-yard box. Howard Webb didn't give it. Now, I thought Howard Webb had a pretty decent game, and people can tweet and write on the Facebook page that they're going to start watching German football now because, listen, English Premier League football is the best in Europe. I would say the Spanish with Barcelona and Real Madrid technically is very good to watch, but you know, for all-out action, where can you see a bottom club like Blackburn a few weeks ago beating Manchester United, one of the top clubs, at Old Trafford? It doesn't happen across Europe, but you know, it happens in the English Premier League all the time, and we saw Swansea nearly pull off a good result against Chelsea last week, and this had everything that was great about the English Premier League. It was absolutely fantastic. Great goals, style, you know, Mata's volley was fantastic, and yeah, it was just a great game. But character from Manchester United to come from 3-0 down away from home at one of your top competitors there. For Chelsea, though, a collapse of 3-0 up, very disappointing. AVB obviously will look through that tape and just pick out the things that they need to work on. I know they'll say no Ashley Cole, no John Terry, but you know, and you managed to score those goals, you know, without those two in the starting lineup. But 3-0 up at home, drawing 3-3 is like losing the game.
OK, well, it's the result that leaves Manchester United 2 points behind leaders Manchester City. What did you make about of events at Stamford Bridge? Do please get in touch and let us know. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes with more updates as well from the big game in the Africa Cup of Nations. Ghana against Tunisia. It's Ghana with the advantage as they look for a place in the semi-finals against Zambia. Don't go anywhere. OK, you're watching Sports World. Have your say. Let's just have a look at how the top of the Premier League table looks on Sunday evening after the weekend's round of fixtures. That is, in fact, the bottom. As you can see, Villa stay 13th after their defeat to Newcastle. Bottom three, Wigan, Blackburn, Bolton there. But that is the top. City leading the way, 2 points clear of Manchester United. We've got to talk about Newcastle, though, after their result today, really, haven't we, Mark? Things just continue to go from strength to strength.
A great win for Newcastle United. You know, Demba Ba and Papa Cisse coming back from the Africa Cup of Nations from Senegal. Senegal's losses, Newcastle's gain. Alan Pardew putting both those players on the score sheet. Delighted, another home win, and gradually rebuilding, restructuring the club, trying to get it younger players, embracing a little bit more energy, and they got that today, and they get great crowds up there, as we know.
Thanks very much, Mark. You're watching Sports World. Have your say. We're reacting to results at Stamford Bridge. It finished Chelsea 3, Manchester United 3. We've got John, a Chelsea fan who joins us on the phone from Israel. John, what was your reaction to that today?
Very disappointing, very flat after the first 3 goals. It was inevitable that United would come back into the game, and I don't blame Howard Webb. The players go down so easily that if a defender puts his foot out, it's likely to be a penalty. The first, I agree with Mark, there was a penalty. He definitely caught Evra's feet. But the second one, I didn't see that as a foul. Ivanovic tried to move his foot away, and Welbeck looked for it.
to say that if Ivanovic sticks his leg out in the penalty area and doesn't get the ball, then he's encouraging the challenge. And I think Welbeck, it's not up to him to jump over Ivanovic's leg. Welbeck's trying to sprint to go forward, and I think it was totally different than Adam Johnson's yesterday. And I have to disagree with it. I thought it was a foul from Ivanovic. I thought it was a clumsy challenge.
Well, you're the pro, so I won't disagree about that, but I felt he tried to withdraw it. He realised what was happening and tried to withdraw his leg, and I felt that Welbeck looked for it. As the pro, you know better than I do, so I accept that.
Well, as the pro, I can say to you as well that players do go down and look for it, and they're trying to con the referee a little bit. They see that as part of the game, and it's crept in from some of the foreigners. But I have to say, some of the English players now are as good at feigning injury, feigning going down, free kicks, as the foreigners. So I will sort of like give and take a little bit there. Yes, the English players are guilty of it as well.
Agreed.
OK, well, let's hear what Chelsea boss Andre Villas-Boas had to say after the game.
It's very, very disappointed. It's a big disappointment for everybody. You know, coming from a situation where we were 3-0 ahead and finishing 3-3. Great comeback for United for sure. Great commitment and great desire. A team that never gives up and has educated ourselves to show exactly that through the years, and it's one of the greatest comebacks for sure.
Andre Villas-Boas understandably down there. John, what did you make of reports in some of today's papers that he's out at the end of this season? What do you think today's result does to that kind of argument?
None of us know what's going to happen. It's all up to the big boss. When he decides what's happening, it happens. I think there's a lot of feeling that Villas-Boas is out of his depth. But one has to give him time. He's been in the job a few months, and I think the least we can do is give him the whole season. But
I don't think that he's got time on his hands. This is a team that came running up in the Championship, lost the Champions League final. Abramovich is looking for the Premier League title and the Champions League title. So with Jose Mourinho saying last week he wants to come back at the end of this season to the Premier League and he wants to go back to Chelsea, I think undermines him. And I think a result like this doesn't do him any favours, because if you look at him statistically, he's the second most inexperienced manager in the Premier League. I think Steve Keane has got fewer games than Andre Villas-Boas. Now, regardless what he did at Porto with the Europa League and the league, in the English Premier League, he is the second most inexperienced manager.
And I thought it was very interesting this week as well, Mark, that he even admitted that he felt Chelsea haven't improved since the start of the season.
Well, I think people would say when he brings in his own players, and we talked about the spine of the team before about, you know, Drogba's getting old, Frank Lampard, John Terry, they're all getting on. I think Ashley Cole is good. I think he's 30 years old. Petr Cech isn't what he used to be. So he needs to bring his own players in and then then manipulate his team. When you're at one of these top clubs, you don't have the time. You go in there, you need to do it now. And, you know, you're not talking about 4 or 5 years rebuilding process. Look how Arsenal have got themselves in this situation where haven't challenged for anything since 2005. I mean, they lost the League Cup last year, but haven't really challenged for anything seriously. So, you know, they've got a bigger stadium, more fans, and they're less impact in the Premier League. So I don't think Chelsea want to get themselves in a scenario like Arsenal have.
Well, it was Roberto Mancini who said before the game he'd be supporting Chelsea, and Tatiana, he is really the one who's going to be jumping tonight, isn't he?
Absolutely. I definitely think that City fans are just kicking themselves. I've talked to a few of them. They're all very bitter about, you know, the penalties and stuff, and all, you know, talking about Howard Webb. But I definitely think that...
Oh, apologies. We seem to have... Oh, are you still there, Tatiana?
Yes, yes. Yeah, so I don't know. I just think Rooney really... United this season's really needed a leader and, you know, someone to really just push the team. And I feel like Rooney did that a lot this game. His 2 penalties were brilliant. He did great for almost basically setting up that 3rd goal. Giggs' cross was fantastic. I don't know. I just think United really, really deserved it. It feels like a victory to me. It really does. And I think City fans will just be kicking themselves that we...
Well, George from Nigeria has given us a call using the usual number, +44 20 70 83 73 33. Says it's not just Manchester City celebrating. He's an Arsenal fan from Nigeria. Says, I'd like to defend Howard Webb. He's an excellent referee. This is a great result for Arsenal. I'm confident we can finish in the top 4 this season. Tatiana also there mentioned leaders. John Terry wasn't in action at Stamford Bridge today. He was watching from the sidelines due to injury, but he will not be leading England to the European Championship final, stripped of the captaincy because of the ongoing court case over allegations of racist abuse to Anton Ferdinand. John, you were watching that game. You've watched all the treatment of John Terry. What do you make of it? Just too big a gamble for the FA, wasn't it, to keep him with the armband?
It was understandable. They were never going to keep him on once the press started to make a lot of noise of saying the fact that you cannot have him as captain. It's a bad example. He's lost the dressing room. So I understand the reason why they made it, but there are also one or two other thoughts that cross one's mind, that conspiracy theories and all that there are people who want Terry out. The previous incident with Wayne Bridge, well, there were various counterclaims that nothing ever happened. And it seems whenever John Terry does something, it's highlighted. The role of England captain is such a responsible one that you have to be whiter than white, if you excuse the expression. And unfortunately, he tends to get himself into trouble far too easily. The crowding of referees, the various other things he does are not a good example. And while he's a leader on the field, he has to be a leader in other ways. And I think one can say that Rio Ferdinand has shown a lot of respect and done the right thing in the way he's spoken, and I think that Terry's let himself down up to a point. But I still have some doubts in my mind whether what he's alleged to have done actually happened. But, you know, we will find out.
I think we have to be careful here, Amanda, because if you look at Rio Ferdinand's history, Rio Ferdinand missed a drugs test and was banned for it. So when we talk about players having a whiter than white image or perfect image going into the captain's armband for England, we have to be very careful because everybody's got skeletons. You know, this is gone are the days of, you know, the great Bobby Moore and Billy Wright. You know, there's players now who have like history off the field, and we have to be careful by saying that unless you're perfect. Steven Gerrard, you know, he had a court case where, you know, the allegation that he attacked a guy in a bar. So we can look and we say, would Wayne Rooney make a great captain? I think he's a leader. I think one of the fans has just said there, you know, this season he's been a leader on the pitch. He's picked up Manchester United and he's pushed their challenge forward. And for England, he's without question our best player. He hasn't produced his best in terms of goals, but would he be a captain who you'd trust going into the European Championships? You'd have to say no, because the red mist appears and he gets sent off again. You know, so we're looking at really who do we think can lead the country into the Euros and who would set a good example on and off the field.
Yeah, it's certainly a topic that's got a lot of people talking on Facebook and Twitter this week. Richard Thrift picks up on the point you were making on Facebook. He says, what goes on off pitch isn't my business. What goes on the pitch is. Ghulam Mohammed says, I think it's a very bad decision. He's a very good captain. His ability to lead team is better than any other player. Neil McCall says, Terry doesn't even deserve to wear the 3 lions. He should be setting an example to the youngsters in the country. What do you think? Please do get in touch. Facebook, Twitter, maybe give us a call. That's what we're going to be talking about and more in just a couple of minutes here on Sports World. Have your say. Don't go anywhere. Hello, you're watching Sports World. Have your say. A little bit earlier on Sunday, Mali booked their place in the semi-finals of the Africa Cup of Nations. They beat Gabon, of course, the tournament co-hosts, on penalties after 1-1 after extra time. Mali into their first semi-final since 2004. They're due to play the tournament favourites, the Ivory Coast, but the battle is still going on for the final place in the semi-finals. Ghana up against Tunisia for the right to play Zambia. We have Hamadi in the studio, who is a Tunisian fan. Hamadi, a few grunts and groans for you. It's not going your way, is it?
Not at all. Not at all. It's half an hour now, and it's still 1-0 to Ghana. But what happened in the 29th minute, it was But being Tunisia, I will call it a penalty, an obvious one, but the referee decided otherwise, you know. It was, it could have been really great for Tunisia. Meanwhile, the Tunisian, after the goal, they start moving a little bit upfield, you know, but I'm not happy because they still have one attacker upfield on his own. And the Ghanaians, the possession is much higher than Tunisian, and they seem to know what they're doing, and they're running the game on their own.
Yeah, Hamidi, I hate to say it, King in Ghana has posted on our Facebook site saying, fantastic play from each side. I must confess, though, the Black Stars look a stronger side. It's very crunchy so far. Is that your assessment, Gary?
Yes, that's the assessment now. I think that Ghana have been the better side. And I don't think it says something good for Tunisia, because in the last 3 games, Ghana's statistics have been decreasing with each game. And so if Ghana are getting the lion's share of the possession and getting the 50-50 balls, I have a feeling that Ghana are going to nick this. Not because I'm here, but from a neutral point of view, I feel that Ghana are playing are the better team so far.
Well, let's welcome Steve Bloomfield to the conversation, author of Africa United, How Football Explains Africa. Steve, what have you made of it so far? People have been a little bit critical of this tournament up to this point, but what have you made of what you've seen today?
Well, I think for good reason as well. I mean, firstly, Hamidi thought it was a penalty. It definitely wasn't a penalty, definitely not. But I mean, I think one thing that's quite interesting about this quarter-final is where it's being played. It's being played in Franceville in Gabon, which is a tiny, tiny town. The capacity of the stadium is actually bigger than the town itself. The reason it's being played there is because it's the home of the Bongo family. They've been ruling Gabon for more than 40 years. And it's just a shame that such a crucial match between 2 of the best teams in Africa is being played in a stadium with hardly anyone there. Yeah,
actually, it's a comment, kind of discussion that a lot of people have been talking about on Facebook, saying Benji Hire says, to be honest, the football is poor, the support is too. That said, the most criticism has only come from newspapers whose reading age is below 4. What do you think? Get in touch. That's what we're going to be talking about in just a couple of minutes. But we have also been talking about John Terry being stripped of the England captaincy. Mark Bright, let me bring you back into the conversation. How big an issue is who wears the armband, or do we all go with Fabio Capello's view that it really doesn't matter at all?
It does matter. I think you've seen the reaction of the media. I think you've seen the reaction of the public as well. I think most football fans see the captain of England is the greatest honour that a footballer could achieve. And as we said before, when you walk up to Wembley Stadium and you see that big statue of Bobby Moore, I think that represents everything that was good in football. And to reach that height, you have to be somebody who deserves to be the captain of the England football team. And at the moment, we have to say it's in a little bit of disarray. I think you have to go back to Sven-Göran Eriksson, Amanda, when I think the game was against Serbia-Montenegro, when the armband changed place 4 times. It started with Michael Owen, it went to Emil Heskey, who handed it on to Gary Neville, who then handed it on to Jamie Carragher as they were all substituted. And there was uproar in the press because they say, the England armband, you know, it's not to be thrown around to anybody. You know, whoever wears that armband should be wearing it with pride and represent the country and be a leader. And I think that it does matter who wears that armband to the English public.
Well, one man who said he doesn't want it is Rio Ferdinand, England's official vice-captain. He ruled himself out of getting the armband back. Have a listen.
I've been England captain before for a brief period. It was taken away from me. So I'd just kind of concentrate on playing for Manchester United, to be honest with you. I'm happy playing good football for Manchester United, and if I'm selected for the squad, then as usual, I'll be delighted. Playing for your country, being selected for your country is a great achievement, and I always say that, and I always feel privileged to be selected. So if that comes around again, then as I said, I'll meet up happily and go and give my 100% all as usual.
Well, Eunice Paxoy has sent us a message on Facebook saying, I agree with what Capello said. It's just an armband. Collective team don't need a captain if they're aware of what they have to do on the pitch. Steve, do you think this could be just an English obsession with the armband?
It is a slightly English obsession, and I think what's interesting is what Mark was saying earlier. When you look at all the potential candidates for captain, whether that's John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, Steven Gerrard, or even Wayne Rooney, they all have slightly, let's say, colourful off-field histories. And I think it's right. It would be good if we could have someone who was a Bobby Moore figure, who was, as clean as Gary Lineker, who could sort of symbolise the nation. But I think it's a reflection of the footballers that we have at the moment in England, that really none of the best footballers are really the sort of people that we want to hold up as role models. I think the decision to get rid of John Terry as captain was the right decision. Can you imagine if Poland and Ukraine are countries where there's been racial abuse from the stands before? If England players have been racially abused and the England captain has asked for his view on what he thinks about racial abuse, it would be very, very tricky. It would be the sort of thing that would really overshadow, I think, the tournament.
Well, if you look at the candidates who are available now, you'd say that it's got to be Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, and then people are saying Scotty Parker. Now, I played with Scotty Parker when we were at Charlton, and I wouldn't say Scotty Parker squeaky clean. Is anybody squeaky clean? But Scotty Parker epitomises everything that the English fan loves to see. He's tenacious. He never say die. He's doing ever so well for Spurs. And I would say as well,
should he actually be in the team? Will Scott Parker definitely be in the starting 11?
Well, you're saying if everybody's fit, then you think Scott Parker, the way that he'd been playing for England, I think he's been in fantastic form. Other than that, I would say Joe Hart. He's a fantastic keeper. He's 24. He's going to be a permanent fixture for years to come. He's respected by the players, and I think he has a stature. I think he has a, and people say, oh, the goalkeeper can't, but they can be the goalkeeper. Dino Zoff, Buffon, Casillas, all leaders from the back. I think, as you said before, sometimes it's about not who's got the armband. I don't think it matters what position. I just think the player who has that armband needs to be respected by the rest of the team.
Adam has just tweeted us using the hashtag SWHYS, says, I think Lampard should take the captain's badge because he has the capability of lifting up the team. Gary, who's joining us from Ghana, keeping half an eye on or more than half an eye, I think, on the Africa Cup of Nations. I think you've also got a view. What's going on in the game? And then tell us your thoughts on the captaincy, Gary.
Well, it's still 1-0 to Ghana. Tunisia are trying their best, but Ghana having more of the possession at the moment. However, to John Terry, I think that it was the right decision that armband was taken away from him. I mean, imagine the scenario of England winning the Euros later this year, and then 12 or 9 days later, the court finds him guilty, and you have to take the armband from him. How are you going to feel?
Go!
How are the English press?
Hamady is cheering. Gary, go on, tell us what's going on.
Well, Tunisia have equalized, but in the process, the goal scorer has injured himself.
I think at this point we should bring Hamady in because he is a very, very happy man. Hamady, tell us what's going on.
It is fantastic. I don't know if because I'm Tunisian or what, but I think it was coming because the players of Tunisia, the players start moving up the field, they start passing the ball, and it really is something. Okay, they kept the ball most of the game, but it was a nice combination of passing and it's a goal. It's 1-0. That's the most important thing. It's 1-0.
It's 1-0 after how long? How long have we had?
The small team came back, so it must give pleasure to everyone who likes football.
Oh, well, it's fabulous to see a smile on your face, Hamady. Do give us a shout if anything else happens. I'm sure we will be hearing you. Okay, we are going to be talking a little bit more about the Africa Cup of Nations and how the state of football stands in Egypt after events in the last couple of days. Please stay with us. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Sports World. Have your say. All of the quarterfinals at the Cup of Nations have held a minute's silence for the 74 fans killed in Egypt last week after Al Masri's match against Al Ahly. There's been ongoing violence and protests since, but still lots of unanswered questions about events in Port Said and where things stand now for Egyptian football. We're joined by Mohammed, an Al Ahly fan from Cairo. We've got Steve Bloomfield with us, author of Africa United, How Football Explains Africa. Mohammed, what's going on now with the fallout from the last few days?
Well, it's been a very sad few days in Cairo because of the events that happened in Port Said. Basically what's happening now is that everyone's demanding justice for the 74 that were killed on that tragic night. there's so many rumors going around saying that this was because in relation to the previous president, and it was something pre-planned. But what people need to know is that Port Said is a very hostile environment, especially for Ahli, the Ahli team and Ahli fans. Before the game, the Port Said fans were aiming fireworks at the players, and action should have been taken then. The referee should have cancelled the game. Security measures should have been up, and that wasn't the case then.
Mohammed, this is Mark Bright here. I went there to the Africa Cup of Nations when it was in Egypt, and I went to Port Said several times. And I have to say that, you know, I never saw anything, any violence or any trouble, and there's always usually a huge presence of military or the military police in and around the stadium. There's usually police on horseback and parading around the stadiums. People get searched on the way in, but it didn't seem that there was any of that in place for the league match. And I was quite surprised when I saw some of the images where there was very few presence of military or police.
That's completely true, and that's why there are a few question marks on this case, especially. Fans going in the stadium weren't searched, and basically the amount of security presence in the stadium wasn't enough. 2 weeks before that game, there was a game in a city called Al-Mahalla, also a very hostile environment for Ahli and Ahli fans and players, but there was a lot of security, and even the game was called off because of a problem with the fans and the referee. There was enough presence that they divided the pitch with the security basically standing in one line, and not allowing fans to cross over to the other side. And that should have been the case during that game with Ahli and Port Said, Ahli and Masri in Port Said, and that didn't happen.
But just
obviously
under Mbarak's rule, there was never any of those, the pitch invasions or trouble outside the stadium, inside the stadium. So I can't understand why it's all gone so wrong.
That's completely true as well. That these things never used to happen in Cairo. That's why there are a few sounds out there, people making noises that this was pre-planned, and they actually, the district attorney is investigating the whole case. He was in Port Said a couple of days ago, and they're trying to find out exactly what happened, and they've raised a few names that were associated with events that took place in Port Said.
Steve, how surprised were you at events this week?
Sadly, not very, to be honest. I think that there are two separate issues here. One is an issue over safety and at football matches, and this isn't just an Egypt problem, but it's actually, you see it all across Africa. You know, a lot of these people died because they couldn't get out because gates had been locked. And a number of times I've been at matches in Egypt where there have been crushes either getting in or getting out, and you have security people that really don't seem to care much one way or another whether there's a crush. So I think that's one issue. The other issue is there's a political element to all of this. Al Ahly fans and their main rivals, the Malak, had actually been very involved in the uprising. And Al Ahly fans have been very critical of the military regime which still technically runs Egypt. And in matches previous to this one, there had been lots of chanting against that military regime. And so that's why some of the things that Mohammed says about, you know, there were rumours about what the police were going to do, what the military were going to do in this, following this match, have started to come about, because there is this suggestion, and at the moment it is nothing more than that, that this was in some way planned and was some sort of revenge against Al Ahly. I think let's not create the impression that, you know, football was secure and safe under Mubarak, because it really wasn't, and he was a master at using the success of Egypt as, you know, for his own benefit. But this is...
Steve, I have to disagree with you there, because I was there for the whole tournament, and we went to lots of matches, and you know, we went to an Egypt game where the crowd were in place sort of 5 hours before the game. The stadium was packed with 80,000 people. 80,000 people getting in and out of stadiums, you know, is not an easy thing in any country in the world.
No, it's not. But, I mean,
Steve,
Mark,
I have to say that moving in and out of the stadiums, we were searched, we were thoroughly searched, or our bags were searched, and it wasn't an easy thing. That was for us, the media. So, you know, when we saw the fans getting done the same, I kind of disagree with what you're saying. That it wasn't chaotic around the stadiums. There was lots of people, but it wasn't easy to get in. And I think there were searched
I'd be
people.
very careful about using an example from a huge tournament like the Africa Cup of Nations, where Egypt was at its best and Mubarak wanted it to be at its best, with league matches and with other important matches that have happened in Egypt. I mean, you know, you can give that example. I can give you an example under Mubarak's rule when, you know, I almost, you know, got caught in a crush where I tried to be there 5 hours beforehand, and it was absolute chaos. So, I mean, I think they put on a very good show for the Africa Cup of Nations, but there are all these sorts of issues that were still around under Mubarak as well as today.
I know there's kind of, as you said, two very big issues here, the political issues and the football issues. But Steve, do you think FIFA should get involved in this? Is this their battle to fight, for want of a better phrase?
It absolutely is, and I think it would be interesting to see what stance FIFA take on this. One interesting thing that's come up so far is that the government has sacked the Egyptian FA. Now, normally FIFA would step in and say, oh, you can't do that, that's government interference, that's political interference. And I think it's actually quite important they haven't done that this time. There's been a number of cases where governments have tried to deal with football associations that they feel have slipped up in some way, and FIFA has interfered and said, no, no, you can't do that. But I think FIFA needs to take very seriously this issue of safety and security at stadiums, because if you look at the last dozen major disasters at football stadiums, they've all been in Africa. And not enough of the penalties have been strict enough. When there was a disaster in Ivory Coast 3 or 4 years ago, instead of saying, well, Ivory Coast, you're out of the World Cup, which would have really made them change their tune, they just said, well, at the next match, you have to sell slightly less tickets.
Yeah, Gary is watching from Ghana. I think you've got a point to make on this topic.
Yeah, it's half time now and it's 1-1. But I just want to ask Steve. I just checked you over the internet. Look, Steve, one problem I have with a lot of people, book writers like you, is when you call yourself African expert, you are not an African expert. And like McBride said, the fact that you were here, McBride was here for an African Cup of Nations where there were 80,000 people filled into the Cairo Stadium. You've been here for a few matches in Egypt. It doesn't make you an African expert, so don't give us a break. And stop generalizing, please. Stop generalizing and saying this is an African problem. It's not. You understand
sorry, hang
me?
on. Wait, Gary. Well, firstly, look, my credentials aside, but let's look at this specific issue. Let's look at this specific issue.
Gary, please just listen to Steve's response.
Let's look at this specific issue of safety in stadiums in Africa. If you look at the last dozen major disasters, crushes, they've all been in African stadiums. Now, that's not me criticising Africa. That's me saying that this is just true. It's that, you know, too many African football associations don't take this seriously enough, and that's a real problem.
But I think it's fair to say that in Europe we have the money to build new stadiums, and when you go to Africa, a lot of the stadiums are old stadiums. They try and modernise them for the tournaments, and they try and make it as best as they can for the African supporters. I would say going to the World Cup in South Africa was a fantastic event for me. I mean, I've been to quite a few World Cups, but going there to South Africa and seeing what they did, the infrastructure, building those stadiums and renewing stadiums, it was fantastic. But for Angola, it was different. You know, for Mali, it was different. For Ghana, Ghana was a fantastic tournament for the Africa Cup of Nations. You know, and I never saw any trouble there getting in and out of stadiums. They were modernised.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mark. And which is why I get very, very angry with people like Steve, who sit over there in the UK after having come to Africa once or twice and say what they want.
Well, no, Gary, I mean, I don't want to start defending myself of why I think I sort of know what I'm talking about, but I did live in...
Because you don't have an argument.
I lived in Kenya for 5 years. I reported from 25, 26 countries across Africa. I'm not someone who's just flown in once or twice to Cairo to watch a football match.
OK. At this point, I'm going to bring in a comment from Kenny Laurie, who writes in Lebanon's The Daily Star. saying it's difficult to get excited about African football. The Africa Cup of Nations 2 years ago saw appalling football. This year's has been a little better. As nice as it is to see small countries like Gabon, Sudan and Zambia make a mark on the tournament, the competition simply isn't the same without the big guns. We really are running out of time. Steve, what do you make of that?
I mean, I think what Gary was saying, that there's a certain amount of truth in. But in terms of the quality of the football this time, I think it's been slightly better than it was in Angola in 2010. I think there's a slight problem of having too many tournaments, which we're going to see next year when it moves to the odd years it's going to be in South Africa in 2013. Too much of the football isn't really as good as we would hope.
Okay.
But there's still a chance for this tournament, and I think we've had some very good matches. And if it does become Côte d'Ivoire against Ghana in the final, which obviously Hamady won't be happy about.
Thank you, Steve. We're out of time. It is 1-1 in the quarter-final between Ghana and Tunisia. The second half still to come. That's it from us. Goodbye.